What if what you call desire is not just will, but a secret code of the unconscious trying to guide you? What if behind every impulse, every unexplained attraction, is hidden a part of you that you have not yet had the courage to look? What is your desire trying to tell you, and why do you insist on silencing it? Let's dive into Jung's vision of desire, libido, shadow, and sexuality, not as something to be tamed, but as a bridge between who you are and who you're destined to become. Have you ever wondered, what is the real desire? Not that fleeting impulse that comes and goes with routine, but the desire that thunders in the depths of the soul, that burns in silence, that moves you without you understanding exactly why. Carl Jung did not see desire merely as an appetite of the body. For him, desire was a symbolic, archetypal language, a force born from the depths of the unconscious. What if desire was not only about pleasure, but a call, an invitation to dive deeper into what we are and what we have not yet become? Why do we want certain people, certain situations? Why do some desires frighten us and still attract us? Perhaps because they carry messages that the conscious mind does not yet know how to decipher. What if, instead of fleeing desire, we hear it? What if he was the key to something much bigger than we thought? Freud said that libido was sexual desire, but Jung went beyond. For him, libido was the very force of life, the energy that pulsates when you love, when you create, when you dream, when you fight, when you transform. Have you ever felt that inner fire that has no name, that desire to do something great without knowing exactly what? This is also libido. It moves like a river, sometimes calm, sometimes impetuous, and where it flows, there is the sense. There is power. But when does it block? How many times have you felt exhausted without having done anything physical, or agitated inside even being still? Maybe it is the libido, trapped in structures that do not recognize it. What would happen if you learned to channel this energy? What if it could be redirected to create rather than destroy? Libido, according to Jung, is not just about sex. It's about everything that makes life worth living. But do you know where yours is flowing now? Inside, you live someone that you may never have known. Another, an opposite, a silent presence that whispers between your thoughts, your desires, your dreams. For Jung, we all carry an inner image of the feminine and the masculine. Anima and animus. If you are a man, you carry within yourself the anima, the essence of the feminine, sensitive, intuitive, imaginative. If you are a woman, it harbors animus, the strength of the masculine, firm, rational, assertive. But these archetypes are not only personality traits, they are bridges, ancestral echoes of everything we were and all that we are. And when we deny these inner voices, something breaks. How many men are afraid of their sensitivity? How many women repress their strength? How many of us project on the other what we have forgotten to develop in ourselves? Have you ever wondered why certain people attract you so intensely without explanation? Perhaps because they show you a lost piece of yourself. Maybe love begins as a mirror, and the journey is not to find the other, but to rediscover what you have abandoned within yourself. Have you ever felt that you knew someone even before you met them, as if that person awakened something ancient, familiar, almost mythical? Jung called it projection. It's not the other person you're seeing, it's your own soul, dressed in her face. That sudden enchantment, that fulminant passion, it may just be you looking at yourself. For the part that was forgotten, repressed, ignored, for what you wanted to be, or for what you are afraid to become. We design our soul or our animus and call it love at first sight, but are we loving each other or just our own reflected image? How many disappointments were born from an expectation that was never of the other but yours? How many relationships fell apart because we expected the other to carry what we lacked? What if true intimacy was not to find someone perfect, but someone who helps us see beyond the projections? Maybe real love begins when the illusion ends. Are you willing to see who is actually before you, or are you still stuck in the reflection of what you wanted to find? What if life was, in the end, a journey, not to be someone, but to remember who you are? Jung called this path of individuation. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. Have you ever felt that there are parts of you that live on the sidelines, desires that you hide, thoughts that you judge, emotions that you push to the bottom? Well, all this is also you. To individuate is to gather what has been broken. It is to give voice to what has been silenced. It is to bring to light that which you have learned to fear, including your sexuality, not as something that needs to be tamed, but understood, integrated, transformed. But are we ready to look at all that we are? How many masks do we still use to fit into what is expected of us? How often do we disguise desire with distraction, fear with control, pain with performance? The process is profound. It requires courage. But he who chooses the path of individuation does not walk outward. He walks inward. And there, among lights and shadows, you find an I that has always been waiting to emerge. There are desires that you never dared say out loud, fantasies that arise without asking permission, impulses that come as waves and you try to contain. But does what you hide disappear, or just changes shape? Jung called it shadow. And in the shadow also lives repressed sexuality, that part of the desire that was not accepted, who was judged, punished, silenced. But what happens to a desire that is pushed into the unconscious? He does not die. He disguises himself. It appears as addiction, as obsession, as guilt, or infiltrate choices that you do not understand, but keep repeating. Have you ever caught yourself doing something you said hate, feeling attraction for what it said to condemn? Perhaps it is your shadow asking to be seen. But here's a tough question. Do you have the courage to look at your desires uncensored, to ask what they want to show me about me? Because often what seems dangerous is only that which has been forgotten, and what you call weakness may be just misunderstood power. Integrating the sexual shadow is not to surrender to it. It is to stop being a hostage of what you do not know. Inside each woman, many women inhabit, and within each man, female images shape the dreams, desires, deepest fears. Jung saw the feminine as a symbolic universe, full of contrasts, mysteries, and archetypal forces. Among them, two stand out as opposites that complete each other. The mother-nurturer, welcoming, loving, source of life and security, and the seductive, free, magnetic, indomitable, one who provokes, invites, transforms. How many times do we seek the sweetness of the mother and fear the power of the seduction? How many times we idealize a woman good, pure, careful, and at the same time desire that breaks the rules, that takes us out of control? And women, how many were taught to choose between being respected or desired, between caring or shine? But what if these figures were not rivals but sisters? What if true maturity were to recognize that the feminine is multiple and that all these facets have value? How many women still try to erase parts of themselves to fit into old molds? And how many men are still lost in their projections, unable to see the real female before them? Integrating the female archetypes is to understand that no woman is just a thing, and that within each female lives an entire universe waiting to be recognized. There is a type of hero that does not appear in fairy tales. He doesn't defeat dragons outside, but he faces monsters that live inside him. He is the sexual hero, he who decides to cross his desires with conscience. Because he understood that desire is not an enemy, it is a path. But to walk this path requires courage. Not the courage to deny what you feel, but to look at desire from the front, listen to what he wants, find out what it hides, and above all ask, who am I serving with this impulse? The sexual hero is not one that represses, not the one who gives himself without choice. It is the one who transforms. That recognizes desire as a creative force, capable of generating art, bonds, vision, or destruction, if unconscious. How many of us use desire to escape loneliness, to numb pain, to feel control when everything is out of place? What if, instead of getting lost in it, we learn to lead it? What if every desire was a symbol, a code of the unconscious, waiting to be deciphered? The sex hero knows that crossing fire is not to burn, it is to purify. Because who learns to walk with his desire, he discovers that behind it there is a much greater force. Sexuality is only about pleasure? Or is it a bridge between instinct and spirit, between body and soul? Jung saw sexuality not as something separate from the spiritual life, but as a link between worlds. Because at the moment of desire, something breaks. Logic loses its force, time dissolves, the skin speaks, the gaze touches, the invisible manifests itself. It is at this moment that we realize we are more than flesh, but we are also flesh. Why is it that the moments of deepest intimacy transform us? Do they make us feel alive, connected, vulnerable, and at the same time invincible? Maybe because there, something sacred is revealed. But how many of us cross this bridge unconsciously, using sexuality as an escape, as a currency, as an anesthetic? What if it were actually a ritual, a space where opposites meet and where for a few moments duality disappears? Can we look at desire not with fear, but with reverence? Because sexuality, when lived with presence, becomes a path. And who has the courage to cross it never comes back same. The desire is a portal, but not any portal. It connects opposite worlds, forces that at first sight seem irreconcilable. It is the union of body and soul, of light and shadow, of the male and female. Have you noticed how desire is both attraction and repulsion? How does he call you and at the same time scare you? Jung used to say that in order to grow, we need to integrate the opposites within us. Because life is not about choosing a side, but learning to dance with the polarities that inhabit our being. Desire is the language of this dance. Sometimes he pulls us into lust, and other times he guides us to purity. Sometimes he is voracious, untiring, and others he is silent, gentle. But when we accept all its facets, when we do not fight against what it brings, it becomes the link between the conscious and the unconscious. And then the desire is no longer an uncontrolled force, it becomes a creative force. What you feel is not something to be feared, it is something to be understood. Because it is in the integration of opposites that true freedom is born. And when you understand the beauty and power of the union between these forces, you discover that there is nothing more transformative than embracing desire with awareness. Sexuality is a vast field, and like every vast territory, it can be explored in different ways. But what happens when we start to explore sexuality with consciousness, not just as a pursuit of pleasure, but as a path of transformation? Jung knew that sexual energy, when well understood, is not just a physical force, it is creative, it is healing, and when fully integrated, it can transform us. But how many of us really stop to reflect on what desire teaches us? How many let sex life be governed by the automatic, by impulse, by fear, without ever asking, what am I looking for here? Because conscious sexuality is not just about control. It's not about limiting desires, but about understanding where they come from, where they lead us, and how we can use them for something greater. How can we transform this raw energy into something that enriches our lives? How can we use sexuality to deepen the connection with the other without losing our essence? Being aware of sexuality is learning to see beyond the body. It's feeling energy, exchange, flow. and it is to respect the transforming power that it carries. When you understand the desire, instead of surrendering to it without reflection, it ceases to be an anchor that holds you and becomes a wing that lifts you. Have you ever wondered what makes a relationship truly authentic? What does it mean, in fact, to connect with another person in a deep and true way? The truth is that our relationships are often fraught with unspoken projections, fears, and expectations. We live for a long time hiding behind masks, even in the deepest intimacy. But what if true freedom in relationships arose when we accept what we are, whole, when we no longer try to please, control, or run away, but just be? Because when we integrate the different facets of our sexuality, our shadow, our desires, we not only become more whole, we also become more authentic in our relationships. And what happens when two people meet like this? With its shadows, its lights, its desires not filtered but accepted. Love, desire, connection, they no longer need to be a game of expectations or projections. They can be a dance of truth, vulnerability, and mutual growth. To be authentic in relationships is not afraid of differences. It is not seeking perfection, but learning to see the other in its totality, with their fears and their strengths. When you free yourself from illusions and accept what you really are, relationships become lighter, deeper, truer. And what else can be transformative, if not the ability to give oneself to the other completely, without masks, without games, without fears? Perhaps then sexuality becomes more than a physical act. It becomes a portal to true connections and a path to the evolution of two souls. What about you? Have you ever had the courage to look at desire with other eyes? What part of this dive has touched something sleeping in you? What does your desire try to show you and that perhaps you have not yet heard? If this text has awakened you, provoked you, or made you reflect, please share it with those who also need to hear it. Enjoy and leave a comment telling which parts resonated most with your journey. Let's deepen this conversation together. See you in the next video.